Hey, what's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to a tech update for the 2018 Austrian Grand Prix. The last one we did of these was at the Canadian Grand Prix. Didn't do one for France because it didn't really seem like many teams brought major updates, and there were a few little bits here and there, but it wasn't really worthwhile making a whole video. But for the Austrian Grand Prix, I've been actually quite surprised at how many big updates have come, and also from the biggest boy of the lot, the Mercedes team. They brought the biggest upgrades for this weekend, enough so that Lewis Hamilton has remarked in interviews that he wants more upgrades because he's really noticed the updates that Mercedes have brought for this weekend. So it's kind of weird because obviously we're in the middle of a triple header, so there's a lot less time between these three races where the teams can potentially do research. Do on Friday practice they do all the aero rigs, the FlowViz paint testing, so all that data goes back to the factory, then gets analyzed. They maybe work through some solutions, they test those solutions in CFD analysis, and so you have less time to do all that stuff when it's a triple header. But I guess maybe this was a pre-planned thing, and they knew they wanted to do it in the middle of the triple header, so I guess kind of good timing, good planning from Mercedes, in conjunction with already the engine upgrade they brought for all the Mercedes-powered cars from last weekend at France. So add those two together, and the Mercedes car might look pretty damn good around this weekend. Obviously, they topped the sessions, and Hamilton, as I said, is feeling really comfortable and definitely felt the step up. But we're going to start things off with Toro Rosso here, with a very interesting update to their front wing, and quite intuitive from the Toro Rosso boys. Good to see Toro Rosso, still bringing some nice big updates to their car, because obviously the Honda engine's not that bad, and it's really a case of they just need to keep on working on that actual chassis and car and whatnot, and try and update it as best they can to try and move forward and try and get some more points, because they're a little bit awkwardly still lagging behind, a little bit in 7th place for where they might have wanted to be. But yeah, a nice little update here to the bottom of their front wing. So usually this is a flat surface for most of the F1 cars. You'll see it's a flat surface, and usually they have the end plate with a splitter like this, like a little winglet, to try and channel the air and manipulate the vortex that's created on the outside face of the front wing that will eventually go to the outside of the front tire. But they've split the bottom floor, as it were, of the front wing into these three upstaging sections, creating slot gaps in that can accelerate the air. That accelerating air will mix a little bit better, or that speeding up the air can encourage the air to mix a little bit better as it goes downstream towards the car. So trying to maybe make that vortex as it goes downstream a bit more, I guess, efficient in a way. If it mixes up a bit more, can stay attached. If it's mixing up a little bit more and gets energized as it goes downstream. So Toro Rosso with a nice little update there. A few different angles that give a nice little detail here of the three-pronged stepped kind of approach, but you can see it kind of like delicately swoops down as well. So almost as if that this it's almost as if the leading edge at the very front here almost is going to line up with the trailing edge at the back, even though these two upper points are slotted down. So they're clearly trying to maybe force some air a little bit more downwards compared to this winglet here, which will be chucking the air up, and then you've got this scoop turn, which will try and get that turn that the air needs to chuck it out a little bit wider so it doesn't hit the front tire. It goes a little bit wide of the front tire to go to that point of where the vortex is created outside the front tire, which I've talked about many times before, is a big portion of what they're trying to do, is trying to get air around the front tire rather than trying to go over or inside a lot with the outside part of the front wing, at least. Toro Rosso aren't the only ones with a front wing update. McLaren come to the Austrian Grand Prix with a tester front wing. So you'll notice this is the tester one because it's all in black. The normal spec one that they ran at the French Grand Prix is in blue, obviously as they kind of launch with their livery. So I guess this is very much a test. Maybe they'll end up running it. It seemed like they were doing a lot of aero FlowViz. They chucked in FlowViz paint for their for FP1 running, and it looks like in FP2 they did not run it. So it might have literally been a tester to maybe introduce the actual final thing at the British Grand Prix. But if they do run it in quali and the race, you'll know because it's a full black wing. So I don't know, perhaps maybe they've only got one to spare. So since maybe Van Dorn's got the MGUK upgrade from the Renault engine, maybe perhaps Alonso will get this front wing update to kind of maybe counteract that and be a bit fair there. On that note as well, maybe not aero related, but engine wise, you've got both Renault cars and Van Dorn with the MGUK upgrade. The Renault engine hasn't had an upgrade to the MGUK since 2016, so it's been 2 years since they've upgraded that MGUK. They've had that 2016 spec in that engine the entire time, and so both Renaults and Van Dorn are finally getting that upgrade. The reason why both Red Bulls and Alonso have not opted for it is they could get it. It was available to everyone, but if those three drivers, Alonso, the two Red Bulls, took the upgrade this weekend, they would get an engine penalty, and they'd be, go pretty much to the back of the grid almost. So that's why they haven't taken it. So the only people that are able to take it without a penalty are the two Renault guys, the Works Renaults, and Van Dorn. So interesting there. I guess maybe McLaren, strategically, and also maybe just not wanting to piss Alonso off even more after a very difficult French Grand Prix. Prix, sending him to the back of the grid with an MGUK issue, but we'll see how that goes. I hope and I suspect that's a good upgrade for the Renault in terms of that engine. You got to say 2 years apart, that should hopefully give us them a good oomph. I think they talked about quite a significant upgrade in party mode, that is, for qualifying. So we'll see how that goes on Saturday in the race. If they can actually access any kind of higher modes that are just below party mode that are not kind of quali spec, we'll see. That's to be kind of speculated, but clearly a lot of eyes going to be on Renault in terms of how that does for them versus Red Bull, and obviously Vandal and Alonso will be the best kind of clear comparison. But yeah, McLaren have updated their wings, so slightly different angling of the inner kind of flaps and the kind of cut-ins they've got of these different flaps to try and manipulate the vortex that's going down the inside of the car. And then the major point here is the inflection point they've got on the main plane as it kinks upwards a little bit to try and shape the air underneath the front wing maybe a little bit differently. They've also got this little scoop turn here coming in, and then new shaping to this outside face, and then also the same with the outside little inflection point, upside down U shape you can see. So both McLaren and Toro Rosso opting to kind of change around a little bit on the end plate of their front wings, but also the inside face for McLaren, obviously trying to work also in conjunction with the cape they brought in from the Spanish Grand Prix, and so on, as they try and manipulate the vortex as it goes down towards the underfloor for the barge boards, and you've got the turning vanes right under the suspension arms, and that all feeds through to the rest of the car downstream. So trying to get that working through. Clearly McLaren have a lot to go, so this is hopefully the start of many upgrades they kind of need for this season and the future, but we'll see. We'll see. And finally, before we get on to Mercedes, we talked about Renault briefly about their engine upgrades. One other thing is they've now updated their rear wing, and they've gone back to a more kind of slotted rear wing, and this time it looks a lot more like the McLaren rear wing. So the McLaren rear wing, you'll see later with the Mercedes wing, they've also done a very similar thing. So both Mercedes and Renault opting to copy and kind of mimic the McLaren style of rear wing, where they've got a lot of slots cut in, and not only that, the way the bodywork actually from the rear wing end plates kind of goes outwards, whereas the rest of the rear wing, you can see here, kind of maybe if I zoom in even more, so you can see how the rear wing bends right here, and then you've got the uprights that continue on. So just like the McLaren wing, you've got this kind of pocket of air that's getting manipulated by the air, but also at the same time the air can just slot through the slot gaps and just go through, and it cuts a bit of drag as well and try and just bleed some pressure out to the inside of the rear wing. But here we go then, the major updates for the Mercedes car. So straight away, the rear wing, you can see what I mean by the McLaren-esque, very clearly a lot like the McLaren guys have done for pretty much nearly 2 years now. They launched it 2017 with their 2017 car, and they've been running with it ever since. So Mercedes and Renault now have gone to that kind of style, trying to cut some drag. Obviously Austria power circuit, so you kind of need also a bit of help in the straight line, extra DRS zone, maybe that's on their mind as well, and also just generally efficiency at the rear end. Like I said, bleeding some pressure over, so they kind of maybe look at the data and they kind of seen, okay, we need a bit more efficiency on the rear end. We're maybe losing a bit of top end speed and not really gaining that much in downforce by having the rear wing, the end plate the way it was. So they've gone for this, maybe just a bit of a Austria spec. Maybe they go back to a different one for the British Grand Prix. Obviously British Grand Prix high speed corners, they might want to change that for Britain, and then they might go back to it for races like Monza. Perhaps is definitely a good place they might go back to this spec of rear wing, but a clear big difference for the Mercedes guys at the rear end there. Then coming through to the side pod and the kind of more front facing part of the car, they've changed their mirror alterations, the way it gets structurally attached to the actual front face of the side pod here. So you can see, instead of just floating through with one little bit of carbon fiber, now it gets connected through there and there on the inside to the actual front part of the side pod, and effectively creates this upright here, which will be like a vortex generator for the over the top of the side pod. The air goes through. Once it hits this upright, it's going to get affected and encourage mixing as it goes downstream. Usually it's created by smaller little vortex generators that create tip vortices. This one will be more of a just kind of mixing kind of effect from the upright here, but a bit of a weird way they've done that. And I saw a few people saying that maybe, I don't know, you never know, that some teams might kind of be a bit arsey and kind of maybe argue that why is that there, that's not really structural integral to the car, because technically they're kind of using the mirror in a way where it's not really intended to, just like Ferrari could argue. We'll see if any teams really put up a fuss. They did for Ferrari, but that was a bit more of a bit more of an orchestrated structural kind of debate about that, whereas this is kind of like a little bit of a, it looks a bit finer. And then going on to the actual main barge board part of the Mercedes car, so they've changed a tiny little bit here at the floor, so there used to be a little bit of a gap, and it used to be a bit of almost like a dagger, kind of knife shape sticking out upright that just went straight towards the back end of this rear tire. They then have curved that in, and it attaches to the rest of the floor as it goes through these two little grooves, so they're just kind of smoothing that out, maybe just saw something a little bit different in the data they wanted to change, but they smoothed that out, so it's nice now, and it's now a nice round bump, a lot like the Renault car. Actually, you'll see it kind of look very, very similar look on this floor face here. So just a little closer look and zoomed in shot, you can see the little attachment points here and here. So both these little uprights, literally aero devices, but the way they've attached them, obviously Mercedes can kind of make it look like it's structurally integral to the mirror. But that's been this winglet's been the case there for ages. They don't actually have to technically attach this to the mirror because a lot of teams have had little uprights, little kinks that come out from this part of the car. But here they've decided to attach it to kind of maybe get that connection point, just to kind of make it a bit more legal, I guess you could say. And then finally, another zoomed in shot of the rear wing of that Mercedes car. The clear difference here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots here, and you can't see it from this angle. Obviously, you saw it from the previous one, but this a little bit more outward than the rest of the actual end plate here. You got 1, 2 streaks as well, trying to bleed air downwards, and the same here, bleeding air downwards to the diffuser, and also allowing these slots allowing the air to pass through to try and bleed some air through and get some relief of pressure on either side of the end plate there. But yeah, major updates for Mercedes then, and obviously coupled with the engine, Hamilton saying you really felt it, and so I would put my money on Merc being very, very strong around here at the Austrian Grand Prix. Yeah, I'm impressed by Mercedes, the fact that they turned up here, because usually a lot of the top teams, I mean, you never really see major, big visual change like this, to be honest, a lot of the time. It's been a case of it's usually the midfield teams that do that, and then sometimes the top teams might maybe look at the midfield almost and maybe have a little copy here and there, and then generally it's been a few little tweaks here and there just to kind of fine-tune a bit, so it's nice to see the top runners kind of making big changes like this. So this has been the tech roundup then for the 2018 Austrian Grand Prix. Guys, if you did enjoy the video and find it informative, then do hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you are new around here, do subscribe for weekly Formula 1 content. We will have some F1 content over the weekend surrounding the Austrian Grand Prix, so do get subscribed for that if you're new around here, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.